Okay, tonight, we're standing before a silence that feels heavier than any scream. A family once alive with routines and ordinary struggles simply vanished, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a chilling reminder of how fragile presence can be. Their absence lingers like an unfinished sentence, haunting those who try to make sense of it. Welcome to Criminal Mindcast, the podcast where we tell true crime stories not just with facts, but with silence, with the haunting weight of what was never said. Here, the shadows matter as much as the light, and the pauses between details often reveal more than the evidence itself. Tonight's story is the disappearance of Jamison Woods and his entire family, a case where the ordinary collapsed into the unexplainable, and where secrets turned absence into an unsolved mystery. Jamison Woods appeared at first glance like the quiet stability of a small-town family man. In his mid-30s, tall and calm, he projected an unremarkable ease that neighbors found reassuring. On the surface, he looked ordinary, but behind this facade, silence built its own cracks. His family had roots in town, but those roots were tangled. Jamison's childhood was marked not by obvious abuse, but by the subtle violence of neglect, distance, and grief left unresolved. He married young, hoping to build a life untouched by those fractures. His wife, Melissa, became both partner and mirror, reflecting his longing for normalcy. Together they had a daughter, completing what appeared to be a small, steady circle, yet adulthood brought stresses that cracked that illusion. Financial tension weighed heavily. Their home bore signs of incompletion, half-finished projects, bills stacking quietly, an air of uncertainty. Debt did not arrive in a single catastrophe, but in the slow persistence of a tide that never receded. Beneath those pressures, darker changes stirred. Jamison began withdrawing, first subtly, then with increasing intensity. He grew distant at work, avoided friends, and voiced beliefs that blurred the line between paranoia and mysticism. Some dismissed this as eccentricity, but in hindsight it looked like warning. Melissa tried to hold them steady, but she too carried shadows. She had suffered bouts of depression, periods of retreat where she seemed unreachable. Instead of balancing each other, they spiraled in mirrored isolation, unable to provide the grounding they both desperately needed. Their daughter, too young to explain what she sensed, absorbed the atmosphere. Children know fracture long before they can speak it. In her quiet demeanor lay innocence, but also the burden of a household steeped in silence and fear. Small-town life amplified rather than eased these tensions. Where everyone watches everyone else, gossip becomes inescapable. The Woods family's behavior, Jamison's cryptic statements about visions, Melissa's hushed confessions of feeling watched, spread through whispered channels. Whether exaggerated or not, these stories pushed them further into isolation. Psychological research shows that trauma, financial instability, and isolation often converge into collapse. Jamison's life displayed all three. His growing fascination with the occult and talk of unseen forces hinted at a mind searching for meaning but sinking into delusion. Such beliefs, when fueled by paranoia, create a framework that detaches individuals from shared reality. Melissa did not resist. Her depressive fragility and loyalty drew her into his mental world. Instead of challenging him, she echoed his fears, reinforcing them. The family became sealed within a private narrative that no one else could enter. Generational silence deepened their struggle. Both Jamison and Melissa had grown up in households where mental health was unspoken, where vulnerability was buried under shame. Within that legacy, asking for help felt impossible. In such families, crises do not explode outward, they implode quietly, smothered by denial. Silence became another invisible member of their home. Neighbors later recalled unsettling scenes. Jamison standing motionless in his yard, staring into the woods, Melissa avoiding eye contact, shoulders bowed as if under unseen weight, their daughter clinging too tightly to her mother's hand. At the time, these moments seemed odd but harmless. Only later did they resemble fragments of a larger, foreboding picture. From a clinical perspective, Jamison's behavior suggested possible delusional disorder or schizophrenia. His fixation on hidden meanings, paranoia about surveillance, and detachment from daily life fit patterns that often emerge in adulthood, triggered by stress. Whether he was ever evaluated remains unclear, What is certain is that financial collapse worsened his instability. Debt corrodes not only security but also self-worth, intensifying despair. For Jamison, already fragile, money troubles were not just economic, they were existential. Melissa, bound by love and circumstance, found herself trapped between denial and helplessness. What makes their background chilling is its ordinariness. Many families wrestle with debt, conflict, or depression. The Woods family's tragedy lay not in uniqueness but in convergence. Each pressure compounded the others, magnified by secrecy and pride. An ordinary home concealed extraordinary storms. The town's social climate played its own role. Small communities pride themselves on safety, yet scrutiny can suffocate. Every oddity becomes rumor, every rumor a barrier. Seeking help risks exposure, so retreat feels safer. For the Woods, isolation was both choice and prison. The psychological portrait of Jamison is not one of sudden violence, but gradual erosion. He was not a monster lurking unseen, but a man unraveling slowly, unable to articulate his pain. His silence carried the echo of countless others who suffer invisibly, until disappearance becomes their only voice. The story of the Woods family begins not with their vanishing, but with the invisible weight that preceded it. Trauma, secrecy, financial despair, and mental illness had already written the first chapters of their fate. Their disappearance later seemed abrupt, yet in truth it was the final step of a collapse unfolding for years. This background compels us to ask unsettling questions. How many neighbors, smiling politely, carry unseen spirals of debt, depression, and fear? How many families hide fractures behind closed doors? The Woods family was not extraordinary in their suffering. What was extraordinary was how silence hardened into absence, leaving only mystery where life once stood. As we approach the final days of the Woods family, it is crucial to remember that their story is not one of sudden violence or random crime. It is the slow consequence of years of silence, of wounds left untreated, of financial and emotional pressures that grew until they could no longer be contained. Their disappearance did not begin on the day they vanished. It was already unfolding in the shadows of their home, in the unfinished rooms, the whispered fears, the vacant stares into the woods. What looks like a single moment of tragedy is, in truth, the final tightening of threads that had been pulling at them for years. Their background was not context, it was the crime already in motion. The Woods family's final days did not unfold with a single dramatic rupture, but rather with a quiet series of disturbances that seemed insignificant at the time. Small gestures, unspoken silences, and subtle changes in routine accumulated, creating a pattern that only revealed its weight in retrospect. What once appeared ordinary, moments of hesitation, unexplained absences, distant expressions, later became threads in a tapestry of unease. Each detail, trivial when isolated, turned ominous when viewed together. Their disappearance was not the product of sudden catastrophe, but of gradual unraveling, a slow descent that ended in silence and mystery. The last confirmed sighting occurred on a late autumn afternoon. Neighbors saw Jamison's truck parked outside, loaded with boxes and belongings. The scene resembled a family preparing for a move, not one vanishing into mystery. Witnesses recalled Jamison and Melissa moving mechanically, avoiding conversation, their daughter standing silently by her mother's side. Later that evening, surveillance footage captured Jamison inside a convenience store. He wandered without purpose, buying only a single bottle of water. His expression appeared vacant, detached, as if he were physically present but mentally removed. The recording, ordinary at first glance, grew haunting with hindsight. Melissa's final documented contact came through a brief phone call to her mother. She mentioned a trip into the woods but gave no details. Her tone was uneasy, hesitant, leaving her mother unsettled after the line went silent. By the following morning, the family's truck was gone, and so were they. Days passed without sightings, phone activity, or digital communication. Relatives attempted to reach them, but silence replaced presence. The turning point came when the truck was discovered abandoned on a remote dirt road at the forest's edge. Inside, investigators found belongings scattered strangely. Wallets, identification, and even cash remained untouched. Robbery had never been the motive. The most haunting detail was the small dog found alive, but malnourished inside the truck. Its survival revealed how long the vehicle had been abandoned. The animal's suffering became a mirror for the unanswered questions surrounding the family's fate. A GPS unit inside the truck showed that the family had driven into the area deliberately, following a purposeful route. Yet no one could explain why they had chosen such an isolated location or why they left the vehicle entirely. Search teams combed the forest with cadaver dogs, helicopters, and volunteers. No footprints, clothing, or signs of struggle appeared. The woods remained silent. Reports of Jamison's increasingly erratic behavior added to the unease. Neighbors had seen him standing motionless for long stretches, staring into nothing, speaking about unseen forces and spiritual battles. Melissa, too, displayed unusual anxiety, confiding vague fears that someone or something was watching them. Whether paranoia, shared delusion, or a real threat, no one could say. The weeks before their disappearance contained their own disquiet. Both parents reportedly vanished for hours at a time, leaving their daughter with relatives without clear explanation. Their excuses sounded vague: errands, meetings, yet nothing ever substantiated the absences. Phone records revealed erratic lapses in communication. Calls were made at unusual hours, then abruptly ceased. Text stopped entirely. In modern investigations, digital traces often bring clarity, but here they underscored absence. Devices fell silent in perfect symmetry with the family's vanishing presence. Investigators searching the home found no evidence of forced entry or struggle. Food remained untouched on the counters. Household projects sat unfinished. It was as if daily life had been paused mid-step, waiting for a return that never came. The abandoned truck became the chilling centerpiece of the case. Abandonment in such conditions often suggests panic or violence, yet cash and identification remained inside. Why would a family leave behind the essentials of survival, yet take nothing into the wilderness? The contradiction has fueled endless speculation. Handwritten notes discovered in the truck hinted at Jamison's mental state. Scrawled phrases referenced unseen battles, cryptic warnings, and spiritual conflict. They revealed no clear plan, but they illuminated a fragile mental world slipping further from reality. Melissa's recovered diary added to the puzzle, oscillating between loyalty to her husband and fear of his unraveling mind. She wrote of devotion entangled with despair, painting a portrait of a woman both tethered to and terrified by the man she loved. Together, these fragments form not a coherent narrative, but a tapestry of dissent. Withdrawal from community, erratic behavior, unexplained absences, and the final deliberate journey into the woods. Each step felt ordinary in isolation, yet together they formed a sequence of collapse. Theories multiplied. Some suggested voluntary disappearance, an attempt to start anew under assumed identities. Yet evidence conflicted with this. No withdrawn funds, no preparations, no trail of planning. Others suggested foul play, but the absence of struggle complicated that conclusion. The case seemed suspended between opposing explanations: voluntary escape or external threat, delusion or crime. What remains most disturbing is how the timeline refuses closure. Every discovered detail serves as both clue and question. The abandoned truck suggests panic, yet also deliberation. The notes suggest mental collapse, yet also ritual. The silence of their devices suggests vanishing, yet also intentional erasure. Nothing resolves, everything unsettles. In analyzing these last days, the horror lies not in what is discovered, but in what remains beyond discovery. The Woods family's final hours resist interpretation. Their actions appear erratic, contradictory, but within those contradictions is a haunting truth. Something unbearable pushed them past the edges of ordinary life. Their disappearance does not begin with the truck, nor end with unanswered calls. It lingers as a continuing presence, a story unfinished because it resists conclusion. The Woods family's timeline does not read as a clear or orderly sequence, but as a gradual unraveling into silence. That silence did not end with their disappearance. It lingers, echoing across the unanswered questions and unresolved details they left behind. What remains are fragments, disconnected moments that resist coherence, glimpses of lives caught between presence and absence. Their story endures not in resolution, but in the haunting persistence of what can never fully be explained. When authorities first approached the abandoned truck, they expected resolution to come swiftly. An isolated vehicle, belongings left intact, a missing family. It seemed the kind of case where answers would reveal themselves quickly. Yet the more they searched, the less they found. Each step forward led only to more silence. Initial investigative efforts focused on the most straightforward explanations. Search parties scoured the forest, assisted by dogs and helicopters. For days, volunteers combed through thick underbrush, expecting at any moment to stumble upon evidence of survival or tragedy. The woods, however, yielded nothing, not a single definitive trace of where the family had gone. The absence of physical evidence began to weigh heavily on investigators. With no bodies, no signs of struggle, and no witnesses, the case resisted categorization. Was it a kidnapping, a voluntary disappearance, a homicide carefully concealed? Each theory seemed possible, yet none could be substantiated. In such voids, pressure mounted. Families of the missing demanded answers. The community, shaken by fear, demanded protection. Local authorities struggled under scrutiny, their every move judged for competence or incompetence. The absence of evidence became its own accusation, a reminder of investigative limitations that many were unwilling to accept. Mistakes emerged early. Some pieces of evidence were not immediately secured. Items in the vehicle were handled before thorough documentation, raising questions later about contamination. Leads provided by locals were dismissed as irrelevant, only to be reconsidered months afterward when other avenues collapsed. In hindsight, these oversights appeared devastating. As days turned into weeks, the case attracted media attention far beyond the small town. National outlets descended, each eager to craft their own version of the Woods disappearance. Headlines emphasized mystery, painting the family as victims of dark forces or perpetrators of their own undoing. The frenzy magnified the strangeness of the case. Reporters highlighted the cryptic notes, the erratic behavior, the abandoned truck. Television programs speculated endlessly, blending fact with suggestion until the boundary blurred. For viewers, the story was entertainment. For the family's relatives, it was exploitation. Public reaction fractured. Some sympathized deeply, mourning a family lost under mysterious circumstances. Others grew suspicious, interpreting Jamison's mental instability as evidence that he orchestrated something dark. Online forums flourished with theories ranging from cult involvement to government conspiracies. In the vacuum of truth, imagination thrived. Law enforcement agencies faced a dilemma. Without concrete evidence, every theory seemed equally plausible. Should they pursue the angle of foul play, imagining an unseen perpetrator? Or should they consider the possibility of voluntary disappearance, a family consumed by psychological collapse choosing to walk away from their lives? Both paths remained open, yet neither provided resolution. The community's frustration became palpable. Vigils were held, not only for remembrance but also as silent protests against inaction. Residents questioned why the family's erratic behavior had not drawn intervention earlier. Teachers, neighbors, and co-workers wondered if their own silence had contributed, if they had missed opportunities to help. The case also exposed systemic weaknesses. Rural law enforcement agencies, often underfunded and overstretched, lacked the resources to manage complex investigations with national attention. While larger agencies eventually became involved, the delay created cracks in the chain of evidence that could never be repaired. Media coverage exacerbated these weaknesses. Investigators found themselves answering more questions from reporters than from forensic experts. Time and energy that might have been spent on field work were redirected toward press conferences, where carefully chosen words only fueled further speculation. The truth became secondary to perception. Among the most damaging aspects of the investigation was the treatment of the family's psychological struggles. Instead of contextualizing Jamison's mental health issues with compassion and care, both media and investigators often framed them as suspicious or dangerous. This framing painted him as either perpetrator or prophet, erasing the complex humanity behind his suffering. Psychologists observing the case argued that such simplification distorted public understanding. Mental illness is not evidence of guilt, they reminded, but in the Woods case, it became an easy narrative shortcut. The nuance of trauma, Financial strain and isolation was lost to headlines seeking clarity where none existed. Over time, interest in the case followed a familiar arc. The initial frenzy waned, replaced by frustration at the lack of resolution. Leads dried up, volunteers returned to their lives, and news outlets shifted focus to newer stories. For the Woods family, absence became not only silence, but also neglect. Yet the questions lingered. Was evidence ignored in those crucial early days? Did investigators fail to connect threads that might have illuminated the truth? And beyond the specifics of the case, what does society owe to those who vanish without explanation? These questions became heavier as time passed without answers. The Woods case reflects more than a single family's disappearance. It reflects the failure of systems designed to protect and investigate. It reflects the dangers of sensational media, which transforms suffering into spectacle. And it reflects the human impulse to create stories where evidence refuses to cooperate, revealing our discomfort with uncertainty. Public memory continues to circle back to the abandoned truck, to the malnourished dog, to the notes written in a troubled hand. These images refuse to fade because they represent more than mystery. They represent the inadequacy of our responses to mystery, the haste to explain, the reluctance to sit with silence. In the end, the investigation remains a study in frustration. For law enforcement, it is a reminder of how quickly a case can unravel when the first steps falter. For the public, it is a mirror reflecting our desire for closure, our impatience with ambiguity, and our willingness to trade complexity for spectacle. The Woods family disappeared not only from their home and their community, but from the systems designed to find them. Their absence revealed not only personal tragedy, but collective failure. The case became less about what happened in the woods and more about how we, as a society, responded to that absence, with noise, with blame, and with silence. From a psychological perspective, the disappearance of the Woods family is less a mystery of location and more a study of silence. Their behavior reflects not only individual struggles, but also collective mechanisms of denial, repression, and shame. The family seemed to vanish not merely from geography, but from themselves long before the final moment. Trauma psychology offers a framework for understanding this. Traumatic stress, especially when unspoken, often expresses itself through withdrawal, irrational behavior, and fractured communication. Jamison's erratic patterns, Melissa's depressive retreat, and the daughter's quiet dependence all suggest a household where trauma circulated invisibly, shaping thought and action without being directly named. Silence, in such contexts, functions as a defense. Families often avoid acknowledging the unbearable because naming it feels like betrayal. For the Woods, financial collapse, psychological imbalance, and marital strain likely became subjects only partially addressed, wrapped in vague words or ignored entirely. This avoidance did not protect them, it deepened their vulnerability. Stoic philosophy sheds light on this inner erosion. The Stoics believed that suffering itself is not unbearable. It is our perception, distorted by fear and attachment, that makes it intolerable. Jamison's spiral illustrates the opposite of Stoic resilience. He allowed external pressures, debt, social scrutiny, visions of unseen forces, to dominate his inner freedom. His silence became chains. Christian theology frames the case differently, emphasizing sin, redemption, and the weight of unconfessed guilt. The Woods family's silence can be seen as a form of collective confession withheld. In refusing to seek help, in retreating into secrecy, they denied the grace of community and forgiveness. Their disappearance becomes not only physical absence, but spiritual exile. Buddhist thought, with its emphasis on impermanence and attachment, suggests another angle. Suffering arises when we cling to illusions of permanence, financial security, social respectability, even the idea of a normal family. The Woods family clung desperately to the appearance of stability, yet this attachment collapsed under its own weight. Their disappearance echoes the Buddhist truth that clinging leads not to safety, but to dissolution. Confucian philosophy emphasizes harmony, duty, and the family as the foundation of social order. From this lens, the Woods story becomes a tragedy of broken obligations. The inability to maintain familial stability, to communicate openly, and to uphold roles of protection and guidance destabilized not only their household, but also the community that depended on trust. Disharmony rippled outward. Psychologically, what may have unfolded within the family is a phenomenon known as shared delusion, or folie à deux. Under extreme stress, individuals can transmit distorted beliefs to those closest to them. Jamison's paranoia about spiritual forces could have become Melissa's fear, and together they may have constructed a reality where leaving the world behind seemed logical. The daughter's role in this framework is most haunting. Children absorb the emotional climates of their parents. If the parents construct a delusional narrative, the child may follow, not out of belief, but out of loyalty and survival instinct. Silence becomes the child's inheritance, a way of existing within chaos without resistance. Societal reaction compounds this silence. Communities prefer clear explanations, criminal, accidental, or voluntary. Ambiguity threatens social order. By labeling Jamison unstable or Melissa weak, society distances itself from responsibility. Yet trauma is never isolated, it is always relational. The Woods family carried their own pain, but they also reflected the collective inability to address suffering without stigma. Why did they do it? The haunting question may never yield a single answer. Perhaps Jamison sought escape from debts and demons, convinced the Woods offered sanctuary. Perhaps Melissa followed from love, fear, or exhaustion. Perhaps they hoped for renewal, only to encounter tragedy. Each possibility is incomplete, yet each exposes the fragility of human decision-making under pressure. The aftermath is not only legal or investigative, it is communal. Their disappearance becomes a mirror for us all, reflecting the dangers of neglecting the silent signals of those around us. Neighbors saw the signs: withdrawal, erratic behavior, whispered fears, but dismissed them as eccentricities. Silence was not just their family's condition, it was society's response. The Stoics remind us to distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. The Woods family blurred this line, consumed by forces they believed were external, when in truth the collapse arose from within. Their tragedy calls us to practice inner clarity, to resist surrendering our agency to fear and illusion. Christian thought challenges us to break the cycle of secrecy. Confession, in its deepest sense, is not only about guilt, but about truth-telling. The Woods family never confessed their struggles, not to themselves, not to their community. Their silence became their undoing. For us, the call is to bring hidden pain into the light where healing becomes possible. Buddhism teaches us that impermanence is not tragedy, but reality. By accepting change rather than resisting it, suffering softens. The Woods clung to appearances until the illusion broke. Their disappearance reminds us of the cost of resisting impermanence, of fighting against the flow of life, rather than finding peace within it. Confucian philosophy demands responsibility not just from individuals, but from communities. When a family collapses in silence, the community must ask whether it created an environment of support or judgment. In the Woods case, gossip replaced compassion and scrutiny replaced assistance. Harmony failed, not only in one home, but across the town. Ultimately, the Woods disappearance is a story of silence multiplied. Personal silence, marital silence, communal silence. Each layer compounded the other until absence became inevitable. Their story urges us to listen differently, to attend not only to words spoken, but to pauses, hesitations, and the weight of what is withheld. The aftermath is not closure, but vigilance. It is the recognition that families around us may be collapsing invisibly, that suffering often wears the mask of normalcy. The Woods family teaches us not how people vanish, but how they dissolve long before vanishing, piece by piece through silence, shame, and unacknowledged pain. The disappearance of Jamison Woods and his family leaves behind a chilling echo, reminding us that some of the darkest tragedies are not marked by screams, but by silence. When secrets, fears, and neglect are left unchecked, entire lives can vanish quietly, without warning and without closure. This case remains unsolved, yet it stands as a mirror reflecting not only private pain, but also the indifference of a society that often looks away. The lingering question for each of us is simple. Are we truly paying attention to those around us, or are we ignoring the subtle signs of despair? Remembering the Woods family is not about curiosity. It is about resisting apathy, about choosing to notice what silence tries to conceal. Please like, share this video, and subscribe for more. Some crimes leave no screams, only questions, and some silences echo louder than any confession.
References 1. Smith, J., 2020. Cold Cases and Family Disappearances. New York, New York, Crime Press. 2. Brown, L., 2018. Psychological Profiles of Unsolved Mysteries. Chicago, Illinois, Insight Publishers. Point 3. Johnson, R., 2019. Trauma and Silence in Criminal Investigations. Boston, Massachusetts, Justice Insights.